Ancora una volta buongiorno.
Once again, good morning to everybody. We would like to start our working session with a brief moment of praying.
Good morning. We are going to start our day of work with a little prayer.
Dall'udienza straordinaria di Paolo VI per il centenario dell'Istituto, 5 luglio 1972. Figlie carissime in Cristo, la celebrazione di una data così importante per la vita del vostro istituto non può limitarsi alla semplice visione retrospettiva
retrospective vision of the past. It is necessary to look forward and look ahead. Will your congregation be able to respond to this call in this hard moment? By which tools the ancient vitality of the strong roots set by your founders will flourish also in the future. If we want to answer to this question, we have to say that the only answer is holiness. You have the privilege of belonging to a religious family which belongs to Mary, and everything is recalling Maria, Mary. This is what Don Bosco wanted to create as a great recognition towards Mary for the benefits she gave us. Since you will be able to always resort to Jesus Christ, since you will always be fixed on her figure, she is the masterpiece of work in your institution, that great source of devoutness and spirituality will never die and will never be exhausted. That source which made you the most precious collaborator in preserving and saving the souls. Mary, Mother and Educator, help us in supporting the youth by giving them the richness of Christ and understanding the beauty of our educational work. Amen.
Serve nulla più, coi piedi a terra e il cuore in cielo, con questa gioia che non passerà, viviamo e camminiamo insieme. Let's build this dream where we're all one family.
Ascoltami, sai che puoi fidarti di me. Quando tutto sembra più difficile, scopri che un attimo è prezioso così com'è.
Sí, miremos siempre hacia el horizonte y dejemos que esa luz illumine la noche. La speranza rinasce, una strada si apre. Nel vento sentiamo una voce che parla di pace, pace. Coi piedi a terra e il cuore in cielo, con questa gioia che non passerà, viviamo e camminiamo insieme. Let's build this dream where we're all one family. Esta alegría no pasará, unidos siempre caminamos. Let's build this dream where we're all one family.
Recording in progress.
Sim, olhemos juntos sempre ao horizonte e deixemos essa luz acesa toda a noite. Se guardiamo fisso
the youth, young people that are at the center of our mission, let's start our working day. We greet His Excellency, Mr. Excellency Barranco, the ambassadors of Mexico at the Holy See. Please, Monsignore Vincenzo Zani, he will be the president of the session, the secretary of Catholic Education, that today is called the Dicastery for Education and Culture. Good morning, welcome. And then the moderator of the session, Don Professor Motto, that is from the Historical Salesian Institute. Good morning to everybody, and all those who are following all over in the world remotely. I'm very happy and honored to extend my greeting on behalf of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, and my personal greeting to you that you are in presence and are connecting remotely for this international meeting on the contribution of FMA contribution to education in occasion of the 150th anniversary of FMA. And I would like to repeat the words that we heard from Paul VI in occasion of the century, the anniversary, that are very strong and stronger compared to our words that we're uttering today. Our history started on the 15th August of 1972, and when Paolo Mazzarella and 111 women after they, yes, as married, to be auxiliaries, together with the young generation, especially from those that were coming from the poor, disadvantaged, and vulnerable families. From the creative faith and charisma of Salesians, many initiatives arose that left a mark, especially in those who really care for. At the opening of the first sessions of this Congress that is dedicated to the historical development between lived experience and data, I would like to focus on the three major points: charism, history, and future. Charism. The Catholic education has an enrichment of charism and pedagogies that is unique in the Catholic of the history. The first institutions are back to the 2nd centuries after Christ. So within this scenario, your charisma knew how to renew itself by dialoguing in a generating way with the society and giving effective response to times. So thanks to a circular approach, the charisma nourishes itself with confrontation, sharing, and perspectives without ever losing its roots. According to the circularity principle, in fact, charisma goes back to its origins, but without never repeating itself. In this way, the life that is consecrated renews itself in the listening and reading of signs from times, in the faith that is creative and goes back to its origins. History. This principle is a fundamental element which leads to a particular features and gives a particular feature to historical memory. The memory that the service of education, It's actually part of your history. It's your history. At the same time, the history is revisited. It turns to be a vivid memory, which refresh your present. So this secularity is extended to all educational paths that cannot but root in an educational community. And it is leading points the thoughts of the teaching from the church and the strength of your charisma. In this way, they express your value that enact your pedagogical actions. And today, future now. Today, your present is in relation with the contemporary society and relevant crisis in order to build a future with hope. The Holy Father, in his first relaunch of the Global Educational Pact, witnessed that we are facing a metamorphosis, not on both cultural and anthropological, that accept the paradigms from history. By facing such cultural fragmentation, Church responds thanks to an alliance among all the social actors through services and gifts, must be able to understand complexity and build and contribute to changes without being dragging from streamings. And today, Church call for this global alliance through a purification path of purification of the memory and the heart. History must be purified. Purification is in a way an antidote, effective antidotes. So comparing to the cold individualism and fragmentation of roles. So in this way, it emerges the specificity of an educational community in which the involvement of the actors and the identification sorry, the phone was ringing. It emerges in this way the specificity of educational community in which the involvement of different subjects and the identifications of the goals are determined by a series of values which build Christian identity. Educational communities are not simply services for education and training, because they put at the center of their mission the preoccupation for an integral young formation for youth, and want to contribute to get the potentials, human potential, enhancing them, and at different level, from an ethical, spiritual level, in a perspective of educational sharing, together with families and social society, civil society. They are open communities, open to transcendence, because they pose themselves as tools that give the church experience and giving an important contribution, putting into person and anthropological and ethical values that are needed to build a society that is solidar and of brotherhood as well. So within this scenario, FMR is called to be within a total reality, so that the sign from times can be read, and with the aim of educating new generations in a fertile and creative and dynamic way. With these considerations, I express my wish to FMA to successful results in educating. Have a nice day and enjoy your meeting. We thank Monsignor Zaia. Practically, he profiled the horizon in which we have to place an horizon that has a referment in the past, but is also looking at the present and ahead onto the future. So, in an ecclesial panorama in which the Institute, FMA Institute, is. So, we really thank him to opening this opening of our day and also to open the whole Congress. And now we would like to introduce and present some statements. And the day will be started from Suor Grazia. Sorry, we should move the Pulmino, the bus XA service communications. Thank you, sorry. We are in Rome and we have parking problems and traffic. We are in Rome, also here. So now, let's hear how will be the development of this day. So Grazia Loparco will introduce us the fundamental points. So Grazia, I think everybody knows, the people that are in presence and remotely connected, is the professor of church history at the Auxilium University in Rome. Therefore, she's really ad hoc person, very skilled in this field. So the floor is yours. Good morning to everybody. I will not dwell upon long because today we already introduced our conference. I just want to remind you that this day will be developed in this day. The first session focuses on the general framework of the FMA Institute in 150 years of life and activity. Not yet being able to retrace all the stages of the history by Paola Toso, with a quick reference to the bibliography that has been provided to outline the storytelling and indicate subsequent path. Then Professoressa Maria Teresa Stido, with their historical path between data and experiences, will refer to a wide statistical survey on the spread of FMA on the houses, works in each country of presence throughout the entire chronological period. For sure, the numbers, beyond numbers, are important people. For this very reason, on the afternoon, we will dwell upon the profiles of 6 daughters of Mary, FMA. They are really creative interpreters of the preventive system. It's only a survey among short figures within the normality and educational mission. Each figure refers to a contest. You can find them online. You can also find more short profiles so that we can enable and broaden our insight on life. So we would like to thank publicly all the authors of the texts and videos who from different parts of the world have worked to draw their commitment from invisibility, recognizing the ecclesial and civil value of their work all over in the world. We all remain aware that the few figures represent only the tip of the iceberg that represents fruits of historical wholeness together with the lights and shadows as an educational experiences that has met millions of young people all over the latitudes. After the storytelling of the lived experience, we will reflect on the education gain in the orientation of the Institute, reflection that aims at expressing a new way the preventive system as a pedagogical criterion of action, lifestyle, relations, spirituality of a formative model thanks also to the study of Professor Cavaglià and also to Professoressa Farina, we will focus on the Areopagus of educational science of the Auxilium faculty. So the interweaving of general statistical data with some profiles, with the reflection, the gift of the charism that always in continuum, in the first session, communicate the idea that an effective education cannot be improvised and also cannot respond only to the urgencies of the moment, leaving out choices or priorities and educational adjudicacy. They are out of context. Therefore, the priorities, in the long run, qualify us as FMA in individual places, even the most remote and irrelevant, promote the development of people, and especially where is more necessary. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Grazia Loparco, for your presentation of the very first 3 moments, 1 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So let's now approach the first session. I would like to invite Professor Toso to join us here on the table and to take the floor, because we will now start by talking about the history. There is a great disease nowadays in this world on which we have to work, which is the immediateness. We always live by now. We are sons and daughters of the past, of a history. FMA are daughters of a history. In their DNA, they have 150 years of history. So it's important to, of course, consider the present, consider the future, but always remembering the past. So in the morning, we will do exactly that, starting by the historiographic consideration of the FMA. I would like to outline this historiographic aspect, meaning considering the history and the consideration of history over these 150 years. Of course, she will speak for half an hour. She will try to summarize. She cannot say it all, but of course, she will try to outline the main features. She is a professor of pedagogy history at the Department of Human Sciences at the Verona University in northern Italy, with habilitation at the national level, as a main professor in sciences. She's always focused on the educational commitment of many female figures in the Italian scenario who worked in the 1900s. So she's a specialist of this context. So we would like to give her the floor for this consideration. So first of all, happy birthday. Happy birthday for your 150th birthday. It's not for all. It's a great thing. It's a great success. 150 years are not all compared to eternity, of course, but still it's a great success. Thank you for this invitation, which forced me to study. And thank you for your friendship. Also, thank you for having dared for helping me analyzing your history. I'm not a Salesian, so I was stimulated to study your history. So what I will say is just a summary. Of course, I will try to be clear for everybody, also the outsiders. So I will try to give you an hagiographic summary, which is not just talking about the history of these last 150 years, but trying to give you the main insights on the researches which have been carried out on your history itself. So, reading history is extremely important for the identity of the congregation itself, means verifying also which were the main insights compared to the beginning, and which were the path taken compared to the initial insights, the spirit of the beginning, so to awaken a better awareness in planning the future ahead. It also means being aware of one's identity and maturing the awareness that the traces of the past contains the seeds of the future. This also implies understanding the historical context, the social, cultural, economic, and religious context where the congregation worked and from where it started its activity. So today, during these last 150 years, you are present in 105 countries. You are active in, you are 11,000 people working in these countries, and a better knowledge of your history can foster a better fidelity to the charism for a better commitment in the church and in the society. So, going into the details of the hagiographic research and the hagiographic production, I would like to say that till the very first part of the 1900s, the knowledge of the Institute was linked to the oral transmission of the historical memory and the spirituality of the founders. So, storytellings and sites, biographies, and local chronicles. But there's not so much documentation available regarding the very beginning of your activity, because maybe it was not just considered to be necessary, but also because, for sure, the commitment of each and every single FMA was much more oriented to the practical service instead of writing down reports, chronicles, dossiers regarding the activities carried out or summarizing what they were actually doing. Starting on 1907, when Don Bosco was declared venerable, his figure was considered from several points of view as a founder, a master, an apostle, and an educator. And it was indicated as a model of holiness, to know and to love. So, the Institute's historiography in the first half of the 1900s was characterized in a way for its hagiographic literature. It is clear that there is the wish to convey to future generation the initial spirit, which is expressed in and characterized by the simple fidelity, the joyful fidelity of the very first FMA. In the very first 30 years of 1900s, anyone approaching the sources can clearly understand the relation between Don Bosco and the preventive system. So knowing and loving the founder also means, for each and every single FMA, means to being continuously committed in deepening, translating, and implementing the educational methods of Don Bosco with the increasing concern that the basic elements of the method are not to be misunderstood or misinterpreted in any way. During the 50s, we can see how a new model is offered, the model of fatherhood and motherhood, educational fatherhood and motherhood, which is inspired by Don Bosco and Maria Domenica Mazzarello. She was the one who understood and implemented the religious and educational ideal of the founder in a very original manner, I have to say, and with a female touch also. To this consideration, also a publication contributes. It was entitled Salesian Maternity and Salesian Familiarity. So, lovingness comes back. Loving in the meaning of loving in the relations with people. And this allowed the educator to gain the heart of the youth, so that they feel like part of a group and they are loved as part of that group. We also have to say that at the local level, they keep on being, we also can see some other publications on the origins of the Institute, mainly on the occasion of many anniversaries or celebrations, the 25th anniversary, the 50th anniversary, the centenary celebrations, and other occasions. Dossiers, small books are published, which sometimes are just celebrative publications. They just look like an expression of thanking the Salesian for their work carried out, the service carried out. But it is clear that they miss a scientific feature which we start to see in the period following the Auxilium, which is the most prosperous period where the Institute, by implementing smart, coming back to the sources, refounds in a way the educational charisma of Don Bosco in a creative way, reinterpreted by Maria Domenica Mazzarello and the very early Sisters of Mornese. So the commitment is that of interpreting in a female manner the message of Don Bosco, considering the study, the deepening of the educational experience of the very early FMA, who developed and represented the so-called Mornese spirit. So, starting from the 70s, the attention towards the history by the congregation increases considerably, both upon initiative of the leaders of the congregation, but also thanks to the preparation of some professors of the faculty, the Auxilium, not the Pontificia Facoltà di Scienze dell'Educazione. These professors, these sisters, achieved their doctoral title, and this contributes to the research in a more scientific way. It's a way of going back to the awareness of the genuinity of the sources, which is also supported by the teaching in the academic seat and of the spirituality of the FMA, as promoted by Sister Dal Cerri and carried out also by Sister Posada. In this period, the critical edition of the first constitutions are published, along with the letters of Maria Domenica Mazzarello, and the very first critical studies trying to deepen some aspects of the personality and the pedagogy of Mazzarello, but also the critical edition of the historical development of the Institute. We could also say that the 80s and the 90s represent a kind of Salesian historiographic spring, in the sense that the FMA start to get out of their invisibility and historiographic irrelevance, let's say. So, starting by the second half of the 70s, this attention increases, attention towards the history of the FMA, history which is inserted in the national and ecclesial framework, while trying to outline the contribution given in an original way to the Church, and in particular to Italy as a country. The first decade of the life of the Institute is studied in the volume Traces of Life and Future, Sources and Proofs regarding the first community of the FMA, 1870-1881. This volume was published anyhow in 1996. I would like to say that I will not say the names of the authors. I would just like to say that I will just give you the titles, which are the most known ones, maybe. So this book presents a set of documents unknown till that moment regarding the early community of the FMA, supported by Maria Domenica Mazzarello, and started in Mornese, then transferred in Nizza Monferrato. Regarding the very first years of activity of the FMA, we have to also mention the volume, the book, regarding the history between 1878 and 1923 of the school Our Lady of Grace of Nizza Monferrato. There is also another contribution regarding the educational methodology of the FMA in the education of girls and young girls, referring to the preventive system according to Maria Domenica Mazzarello, and the title is The Art of Educating According to the Preventive System, Insights and Perspectives. There are other contributions which are important as well, of course, regarding the figure and the work carried out in Sicily by Maddalena Morano. We are talking about Sicily. Nido Vittorio Emanuele III, promoted by Lega del Bene, joined in a second moment by the FMA. Regarding the path of the congregation and its spreading all over the world between the 20s and the 60s, I'm talking about the 1900s, of course, there are two more volumes by Sister Bianco. The presence of Salesian sisters in Italy is described in the volume entitled The Daughters of Mary the Help in Italian Society between 1900s and 1922, Paths and Research Problems. This shows how, with a unprecedented braveness, the FMA start their activity in Piedmont, in Sicily, but they face new situations. They are present during the First World War in the military hospitals. They assist soldiers, migrants on the ships leaving the port of Naples. These years see also these sisters training as teachers. They start to work in the state schools, and there are many congresses, seminars, many volumes also outside the institutes, contributing to deepen the identity and the mission itself of the FMA, but also the spiritual dimension together with the educational style, but also the commitment towards female promotion. Then, the general trend of the historical studies shifts from an attention on sources regarding origins towards an attention towards the institutional development, not just at the Italian level, but also compared to the presence of the FMA and their work in several parts of the world. So the historical researches in this field, just summing up, are promoted by the faculty Auxilium, the Faculty of Educational Sciences and the Center of Studies, but also the Salesian History Cultures Association, the ACSSA. So starting by these studies, we have to say that the sources are not just analyzed, so internal documents, but also external documents are examined. So starting by the second half of the 90s, new seminars, periodical seminars are held at the continental level, international conferences which are high-level scientific features. So I would like to mention the work in 2 volumes regarding the Salesian education between 1880 and 1922. This volume was published in 2007 and outlines the diffusion of the presence of the FMA and their educational commitment in several geographic environments. These show that they are able to make flexible their model in different contexts, historical, social, and cultural context, and also to be able to have a dialogue with the local civil and ecclesiastic authorities to choose lay collaborators to achieve academic titles for carrying out their works and teaching whenever required by the state legislations. Then, FMA are also required to have a great initiative capacity and ability, vocational fidelity, not to give up their educational mission among the youth and education of new vocation. This is what emerges clearly from the text and the book called Salesian Education in the Hard Years of the 20th Century, which is a period marked by cultural and political movements, which have a lot of follow-ups on educational institutions and congregation acting in several states. So the difficulties presented by the historical and political context, sometimes undermining the possibility of achieving the Christian education with an eye also to the integral education and the preventive system of Don Bosco. All these difficulties are overcome by a strong educational passion, pushing the FMA to face challenges and risk in the first line, the first row as a community, without passively bending to the contingent situations. So the panorama is really interesting, I believe, because I speak as an Italian citizen. I'm not talking just about the fascist period, but also the other difficulties that you have experienced also in the European countries, still nowadays also. Many difficulties in their history. On the occasion of the 150th years of the history of the unity of Italy, 2 volumes regarding the presence of the Salesians in Italy are published, and this work is supported by important statistical data. So your history cannot be considered as a private fact. It's a living component of the history of this country. FMA are dedicated to the schools for ladies, to the education of teachers in the schools. They are active in the very first forms of emancipation of women, in the initiatives to guarantee study title for all ladies, so allowing them to achieve not just an identity as mothers and wives. A great attention is also paid to young workers, female workers. Work sometimes eradicates them from their lives. Sometimes it exposes them to kinds of lifestyles which are totally different, also influenced by the press, the cinema, and also sometimes they find themselves in a kind of personal crisis, we can say. So we could also say that the Salesians are able to promptly respond to the needs of a society which is characterized by this modernity, which put some questions on the new issues set by history. So this can be found in the Congress on the Congress of the Salesian History, collected in 2 volumes, entitled The Development of the Charism of Don Bosco till the half of the 20th century. This book documents the presence and the educational experiences in many continents. There is another thing, the attempt to define the studies produced in several countries all over the world following the Concilium. This is expressed in the volume. It's a big volume, I have to say, which is entitled Historiography, Salesian Historiography, between Studies and Documentations in the Post-Concilium season. This contribution allows to know and acknowledge how the Salesian charism has developed in any context, while contributing to local tradition and culture, while giving its contribution, of course, contributing also to the development of the local church and the country as a whole. It is also important to consider another research, which is the bibliographic research of the Institute, which was published in 2018, dealing with a kind of mapping of sources, biographies, and studies available in original language, but also in many other translations, which is a great tool for everyone who is willing to study your history. It's a precious instrument, really. On the occasion of the 50th anniversary of its foundation, of the Center of Studies, in 2020, the Percorsi path publications start. There is this publication of the diary on the occasion of the first travel to the United States of America of 1895-1897. Then the 10th volume of the Association of the Cultures of Salesian History, presenting the biography of 26 Salesians and 22 FMA who lived between the 800 and 900. It's a minor history of sisters who invested all physical, intellectual, and moral energies in the growth and the development of the youth and the common good in the 4 continents. Then we have also to mention the important collaboration in the research with lay researchers on general issues regarding the history of Italy and the education, the formation of women. An example is the volume In the Streets of the World, Lay and Religious People between 800 and 900. So we would like to say that the period 1975-2012 sees the first publications, historical publications, regarding the female Salesian Italy. Then I would like now to suggest, from my point of view, of course, some possible paths for historical research. It's extremely important to cure the internal sources. So start by the chronicle of each and every single community to restore the historical happenings, chronicles of each and every single community inside its group, of course. This implies keeping the memory of the past, that so-called microhistory, which also helps to renovate the motivation in what we daily do. It's also important to keep on recuperating the memory of the most important, of the most forgotten figures, the less known ones, or people who have been forgotten sometimes. We should work on those figures. Whose biography should be deepened, and considering also their initiatives. would be extremely interesting. It's important to reconstruct the evolution of the presence of the order in the several geographic contexts compared to the social cultural realities where they acted. So in Italy there are many works and also in other countries, but we have to consider also minor countries and minor situations. The ability of Salesian educators to detect the educational demand and providing proper responses must be highlighted. So how social protagonism of the young ladies was promoted and their responsibility in the world, through which formation paths was it done? Which was the formation role of female oratory? How to train good Christians and good citizens? Which was the formation for the world citizens? Which was the contribution through the people education, also through the fight against illiteracy, which was the commitment of the teachers in this field, which was the relationship with the working reality. And we have to acknowledge the intermediate role of the FMA between industrials and workers in the process is finalized at improving the occupational conditions and the legislation protection of these workers, which was the contribution in implementing the unity of our country, which is the educational commitment thanks to many other things, like, for example, in Italy, the transfer of the staff, which contributed to improve the scenario also in Italy, while fostering the cultural interchange among the several regions, the civil and social political commitment on the occasion of a special situation like natural disasters, earthquakes, floodings, and two more things, which were the follow-ups of the formation activity for ladies in the schools, in the working sector, in the oratory, how the values of the Salesian experience affected the lives of these ladies and the people who were related to these ladies, with whom they interacted. How the preventive system rooted in the non-Western society, how was it developed? So it's important also to consider the historiography of the Institute in an international perspective also. This allows to get a better awareness of what has been in the past, so to adopt strategic choices for the future, also translating the identity of the FMA in a renewed way. Without roots, there's no future. So, in a way, it's about taking on the responsibility of fostering one's own files, records, history, so that history and the past are not lost, do not disappear. So this requires the ability to safeguard, keep the historical heritage, and you have a great heritage, and to somehow not just keeping the documents, but also it requires greater competencies, because in order to keep in a proper way all these data, in a way that make these data available to all, competent and well-trained people are much required. People who are able to understand the history of the Institute, so to properly provide this information also to those who need this kind of information and data. So it's necessary to have the braveness to invest in the education and formation of people. This implies economic resources, but first of all, human resources. Your future depends on this point, first of all. So consider that 150 years of heritage, it's something great. It's not a private issue. It belongs to your family, of course, but not just to your family. So you have the great responsibility to share this great heritage and to make this known to all. It's a great history, and I would like to say, be proud of that. If you look back, if we stop and look back to the history of these last 150 years, we see a lot of beautiful stories for which we have to be thankful to our predecessors, and thanks to whom we are here today. It's a great responsibility, and you have to keep this great heritage. So be proud of that. Thank you. So, thank you so much, Professor Toso, for this summary. A summary because she had not so much time available, but of course you can find all the interesting things that she said on the website of the conference. So please don't mind if you were not able to write down or to take note about everything. You can visit our website. I would also like to thank her because she said two important things. She taught us that history is not written once and for all. The steps of the Salesian history evolves continuously. It's not just written down once and for all. We always have to rewrite over and over again our history. And secondly, she gave us some homeworks to do. So we have a lot to do. All the secretaries and the managers have to collect all this data, this great heritage, and to keep this great heritage while remembering the historiography goes on. We have new studying methods, a lot of things to work on. So she gave us a lot to do. So the Institute has to properly train people for this service, as she suggested. And as she rightly said, it's not just a service for ourselves only. It's the service, it's for the service of the Church and the society as a whole. We work for the youth of the world. We just don't work for our youth. We work for all the youth. So we have to write down in a truthful way our history while enriching the society with this great heritage that we have. So it's a great homework. So please consider her suggestions. Also for the General Council. So thank you for talking about our history. So now let's talk once again about history.
Not only the history of who's wrote history, but the reality of the congregation that in these 150 years. And the title of the next statement is the presentation of statistical data that for figures for countries, nations and continents, FMA spreading of the communities and works beyond the single nuns. So that's an overview of 150 years of FMA. We will have two sections presented by Salesian Professor Suor Maria Teresa Spiga. She is Professor of Sociology of Education at the Pontifical University Auxilium, and she's also an expert on the research that are very much linked to social issues and women religious life, and in particular to FMA. And of course, she published many works. It is not really the case to introduce them today. Now we give her the floor floor. She will use the computer. She will project this data. Please, we have to read carefully and with intelligence the figures. It's not just a photo. That's an historical document that has to be interpreted with intelligence. So the floor is yours. Good morning to everybody. I wish to you all the best so that our morning can be fruitful, but we can now look at another perspective before compared to the previous ones, and we can enter into the life of the Institute. My remarks dwell upon the result of our study that was thought and implemented in occasion of the 150th anniversary of the Institute. And in fact, many of these data that we will see, they were published during that 24th general chapter, during a particular moment in which the Institute paused and started to think in view of the discernment of the communitarian search for the future of the Institute. The factor of dwelling upon the analysis of data concerning the life of the Institute in these in 150 years, it's, in my opinion, a privileged moment if one questions oneself about history, and if history can constitute an important hermeneutic key to line up with the continuity with the vocational fruitfulness of the origins and plan the future with boldness. For collecting data, it was used as source the archive made available by the General Secretariat, and in particular the general list, both in paper and digital format. The information has been collected and digitized for the years throughout the decades, the so-called years of decades, from 180 to 2020, and more recently for the years 2021 and 2022 that open the decade 2020-2030. You will see from the graphs that this decade will be indicated, but we will use it for the years I was referring. As for the houses, and when I'm calling about houses, I'm thinking about communities, the data are updated to August 2020. Those of the Orders of Mary Help of Christians are updated to December 31st, 2021, being not yet available the complete data concerning 2022. Therefore, as to the works over the years of the decades, they have been digitized community by community up to 2020 included. Therefore, they have been really digitalized practically, and therefore with regard to 2021 and 2022, the data provided by the platform of the Institute, with which there is a collaboration, is underway a collaboration, and these data were used to be aligning the data coming from the research, and this is not an easy task because the two archives have been organized with the objective that meet actually different needs. In this work, my best thank you goes to the Carotti from the General Secretary, and as concern the digitized and paper newspaper list, and Suor Marigano, that she's working full-time with the collaborative platform of the Institute. The life of the Institute expresses itself through in the communities, and when I'm talking about works, I'm calling about the activities that involve the life of FMA, and this life of the Institute involved a generation of both boys and girls, female and teens, female and male teens from all over the world. And this is the musical note, the A, which has motivated and supported the realization of the present work, especially in the moment of great commitment and effort that it has required. It tends to be a sign of thank you for what the Institute has offered to each FMA and to a generation of young people over 150 years of history. Now, it is the time to listen with wisdom to history and a teacher of life, and not with a look of nostalgia for a past which no longer exists, but with the boldness and with the gaze of the sentinels which the Psalms talk about, those who precede the dawn and announce the coming new day. The data show in detail that the life of the Institute was woven day after day by community of sisters who, because they felt so, they were able to achieve great things. See the Magnificat of Mary of Nazareth. Looking at page after page the documents that need to be analyzed for the research, one grasps that beyond figures, it's only the strength of being a community that turned the dream of Mother Mazzarella and Don Bosco into reality for the many young people encountered, often overcoming difficulties and obstacles that seems to be overwhelming, insuperable. These are the documents, are the witness really of this fact. The communities of FMA have been generative through time and in the geography, in the sense that their being there meant that the charism of the Institute has been embodied in the space and time, geography and history, and generating multiple experiences, generating a new one, and especially in some historical moments has regenerated the already existing one where it was necessary. The presence has created unity despite the diversity of experiences and process lived. It has activated network activities of listening and fraternal services that also aroused the passion for education in those people whom they have been able to involve, families, young people, collaborators, etc. So, retracing the life of the institutes through the communities, the figures, the work to which sisters have dedicated themselves is full of meaning. To plan today with boldness the prophecy of a courageous presence in the wake of the charism received as a legacy. Now I switch to the title of my presentation, that is the presentation of the statistical data by countries and continents as concern FMA. They tell us that we have to stop for technical reasons. Please, we do anticipate a pause, and then we fix technology, and then we will come back. Sorry, it's part of the history. This happens. Thank you very much.
cose che
È la
succedono dovunque.
contemporaneità.
E intanto pensate anche a qualche domanda da fare magari poi alla fine della mattinata.
I nostri tecnici sono riusciti a sistemare i problemi tecnici che prima non c'erano, questo è importante, arrivano sempre nel momento giusto. Bene, allora mentre ci sistemiamo, ci prepariamo a dare la parola per un saluto al dottor Mariano Angelucci, presidente della Commissione 12 del Comune di Roma, Turismo, Moda, Relazioni Internazionali e referente del Comune di Roma per il Giubileo. E quindi gli diamo il benvenuto e ascoltiamo il suo saluto.
Grazie e buongiorno a tutti quanti. Vi porto i saluti del nostro sindaco, il professor Roberto Gualtieri, di tutta la giunta capitolina. Grazie per avermi invitato a questo convegno internazionale.
This international conference on the education of the FMA since the beginning of the foundation till nowadays. Thank you for inviting me to celebrate with you 150 years of your commitment and presence. Thank you for whatever you do in Rome and for the youth, with your full commitment on the territory. Your method, inspired by the preventive method of Don Bosco, is known to all, and today it still inspires your activities and your ability to meet the challenges of today. This is a great value for the institutions which work for the good of this activity. When we work on the part of the citizenship community, the effects of the change affect everything, just like waves generated by a stone thrown into a pot. So it brings great benefits to the whole community. I took some of my time, part of my time, to think over your educational project and consider the main aspects of this international conference. Something has particularly attracted my attention as a public administrator and citizen, educating community, perspective and challenges, complexities and multiplicity. The importance of the female role, education of the youth in the poor people classes. Your 150 years witness that these words correspond to the facts. Chosen also in the hardest and most difficult suburban areas of our cities from which I come, where you just not assisted the people most in need, but where you provided your assistance and projects to all. This is the importance of your values. This means believing and loving Rome and its reality. This means serving the reality where we live. Your presence is not just useful, but also necessary. No public institution can implement its political agenda of change and growth of the city without the interaction, the collaboration of those who live and love the community where they live. Ethical innovation, inclusion, sustainability, education, and cultural growth of all are just a few of the key words of the political agenda of Rome. There are common values and objectives between our political agenda and your mission. We have to look ahead, starting from the present. We do not have to seek for responsibilities for whatever is wrong in it. We have to understand what we can do for relaunching this city, which every day welcomes people from all over the world. By this spirit, we are preparing ourselves for welcoming and hosting the Jubilee 2025, a marvelous event. An event for all the city and for all the world. And so we are working hard so that Rome will be able to properly host millions of pilgrims coming to our city on that great occasion. Some could say that by culture and education you cannot earn your bread. But this is wrong. Without education, without professional competencies, there's no future. And the first to pay the price for that are the youth and the women. There's much needed to regain cultural dignity to those who are most excluded. Educational centers, schools, and all these institutions are the places where the protagonists of the future are trained and educated. The education is important for the growth, the social and economic growth of a community. In order to have good citizens, we have to educate the youth towards the values of respect, hearing, listening to the others, and loving the environment. This is where peace comes from, that peace which is threatened today. If we are together, united, we can win over every difficulty. We need good and honest citizens. As Don Bosco said, by concluding my intervention, I wish to keep on working on training and educating good people for the common good also. Educating them to respect the environment where we live, in one word, trying to respect Rome and this marvelous city, which is what we exactly do in our daily activities. So respecting all the realities and all the aspects of this territory. If we work together for a common goal, which is the growth, the peace, and the inclusion of all, only by doing so we will be able to win all the challenges. The Jubilee is a great challenge that we have to face all together, and that we have to, where we have to win all together, according to what Pope Francis says. We are working so that Rome becomes an inclusive city, welcoming all and ready for this great challenge of the Jubilee 2025. The municipality is ready for that, and we are working hard for reaching these goals and achieving these targets. So best wishes for your anniversary, and have a nice day. So thank you, Mr. Angelucci. This is a typically Roman name. We heard his heartfelt words. He also spoke about the preparation of the Jubilee. We can say that we will also give our contribution to the preparation of the Jubilee. We did it for the Jubilee of the year 2000, so we will be able, as a Salesian Institute in Rome, to give our contribution for hosting this great event. So I would just like to say, okay, see you in 2025, but it's not just necessary. We have to act promptly and do something concretely, and we will do that. Now we have to go back to the intervention of Maria Teresa Spiga on statistical data. We have taken some time. We needed some time to fix all these problems that we had. Then we will give you some time to forward your questions, if any. Then in the last half an hour, we'll try to give some answers to your questions and to have a debate. Again, may I give the floor to you, Maria Teresa? I hope this is the good time and that we have fixed all the problems. As I told you, the contribution after the introduction that we have already presented continues with the presentation of statistical data. As you can imagine, the data that we will present are just a part of those that have been produced and collected, because those collected are many and very varied ones. They deserve further analysis on other occasions. Well, the most important aspect that we have tried to tackle with is trying to make this data available for inspectorates, for researchers, for those who want to study the details of these general issue. So I will now show you the data related to the FMA, then the houses of community and the works. Then I will conclude with some questions set by these data and some inputs on which we could discuss regarding the works, so the activities of our congregation and our communities. So let's now go on with the analysis of the first point, FMA in the world in the last 150 years. Well, see here the globe moving shows in a 3D, in a 3 dimension, where the FMA have been active and have been working in the last 150 years. So this 3D will show you concretely the strong presence of FMA in the world. You can also see them in the middle of the ocean. Can you see that? It's something orange in the middle of the ocean. This image shows also the places from where our sisters are following us remotely today. I believe that each of us has recognized her own community, her youth, her congregation, her collaborators, so you have recognized your place on this map. This is the graphic. In the graphics, I will show you by moving the mouse the numbers and figures which are most significant. As you can understand, we cannot take too much time in analyzing each and every single data, but these graphics show the trend of the situation. So how FMA and how FMA have located in these last 150 years. In this graphic, you can see some colored lines. These colored lines show in red the total of FMA sisters so far, pink the exits, let's say, blue colored the deceased one. So what does this mean? As you can see, the image shows how the trend has gone on in an increasing way till 1970, when we had the highest number of FMA, 18,068. After that, we have seen a decrease till the last updated data as of 31st December 2021, around 10,985 sisters in the congregation. As you can see, these data are extremely interesting because they show how the youth joined the Institute, and when we have experienced and where we have recorded the highest or the lowest numbers. An important datum which is shown here is how, regarding FMA entering the congregation, the highest number is regarding 1960. In the table that you can see here, you can see a kind of summary, but also a complete summary, I have to say, of the 3 categories of sisters who entered, exit, and who passed away, and the total of these sisters for each decade. These data have been processed starting on the digital paper document given by Sister Giuseppina Parotti. So we have in the 2030 involves 10,985 sisters who should be in our system as of now. This graphic urges us to consider something and to set some questions regarding these numbers. What did favor the entrance of the youth in the Institute? How comes in some years the numbers are higher and in some others they are lower? So which elements coming from the social, cultural, and church life have fostered the entrance and the access in the Institute. In a similar way, the questions regard the exits. The main question for the existence of a religious institute is asking itself why so many sisters have left the Institute. Also here the figures are extremely important because if we had the possibility to analyze the situation in different historical periods, we would find different reasons for that according to the historical period that we are analyzing. I mean, probably the motivations by which the sisters today and in the last few years have left the institution are different and they depend on the historical situation. As you can understand, figures describe a situation, but they have their own limitation, but they do not suffice themselves. Of course, they need to be completed by studies and researches regarding the history of the Institute, the history of societies, the history of cultures, and the history of church as a whole. I would like to give an example to explain this. Before the figures that we define as laws regarding the entrance in the Institute, we do not have to forget that there are some social coordinates which do not facilitate the entrance in the Institute, but also ecclesial coordinates which do not foster the entrance in the Institute. I'm talking about the structure of families, the number of kids per each family. In other historical periods, this thing of vocation, and I'm talking about Italy, was very different because in the past families were very numerous and there were higher probabilities and possibilities that the ladies would have joined the religious life of our institute. Nowadays, families, they have a few kids. Sometimes they have economic difficulties, or by structure they can present some critical points which make them incompatible with their religious life. So from the graphic you can see a set of data which deserve a deeper study, but we do not have so much time. In the green table that you can see here, besides showing the data which are reported in the previous table, also adds a further column which shows the increase of the FMA compared to the previous decade. Means we made some calculations according to which I asked myself how many more FMA I got in a decade compared to the previous decade, and we can see that the higher increase of the FMA compared to the previous decade regards the year 1960. Again, what we have already seen in the graphic in the end means that in 1960 we have recorded plus 4,163 sisters more compared to the previous decade. Always remember that in this work, I always consider the years of the decade, so I don't have the possibility as of now to follow how these numbers have evolved year by year in every single decade. Of course, this would imply a further study, a further research that maybe will be done by the next generation, hopefully, naturally. So two important graphics regarding the FMA in the world. This is extremely important because looking at your faces, I have to say that looking at your faces, I had to prepare this graphic and to consider this. You can see on your left, you can see FMA in the world divided by continent. So, talking about the figures, we see that in Europe we see 41.43%, America 28.96%, Asia 25.44%, Africa 3.99%, Oceania 0.18%. These figures must be understood. Someone could say, how comes in some continents the numbers are lower? Because there is a history behind this. If I talk about Africa, for example, the expansion of the Institute in Africa, even if being present in the very first decades of the last century, well, the development and the expansion of the Institute in Africa dates back starting on 1984 with the deliberation of the Africa project of 1984. So it's logical that in the previous decades, I can see a lower presence compared to the presence of the following decades. So figures must be understood and according to specific criteria. On your right, you can see the graphic representing the continents, of course, again, but according to the typology, the kind of FMA, you can see the data referring to entrance, those passed away, exits, and all. The different colors in the graphs show the different continents. So you can recognize the greatness of our family in these graphs. In the graph number 4, the novices are also considered, so different typologies, the priest household keepers, the novices, the total, the temporary sisters. In yellow you can see the novices. So, I made this differentiation because from the juridical point of view, you have to clearly define which is the juridical affiliation to the institution. Also here, the figures are extremely important because if you look at the vertical axis on your left, you can see that the situation is different in the different continents, of course. The Institute was in the very first decades of its life, the Institute was born in Europe, so we see higher numbers in Europe. For the other continents, we will see an increase, maybe in the future, an increase that we are already experiencing now. Let's take, for example, Asia compared to the previous decades. So in the forthcoming decades, if God wishes, we will see a further increase also in the future. So we have spoken about FMA, and since we have spoken about Africa, and I spoke about the Africa project in the 80s, I also thought of giving you an example, showing you the data regarding Africa. So the curve, the increasing curve, starting from the 80s till 2030. This is a concrete example of how we need to study the life of the Institute by continent. So the figures of one continent cannot be applied to others, of course, because they represent different realities. We need to create local histories, local geography in order to understand the trend of these data and these figures. This is regarding Africa. Same here for America, which is another case. By example, you can see the figures and also here for Asia. You have to please pay your attention which are the main differences in the trends of the FMA, for example, in America, where we have experienced the peak, the highest peak of the presence in the 70s, and now we are unfortunately experiencing a decrease, while on the contrary, we can say this it's not happening in Asia, where we are experiencing an increase now. Talking about Africa. We are talking about African local people or Salesians living in Africa. Okay, the data regard the nation where they belong to. So I haven't, we could consider the missionaries who went to Africa, but in this context, we are working on their origin, their nationality. So African, Native Americans, Native Asian. So this study was to show how in 150 years the congregation increased and was enriched by multicultural aspects and many presences from all over the world. So this is what I wanted to do, to show how this family shows many aspects and by representing many countries. So these are important considerations we have to do. Considering FMA in the several continents makes us consider how the communities are composed and which has a different aspect all over the time. In Europe and mainly in Italy, we have seen a concentration of FMA in communities, in significant communities from the numerical point of view. In some cases, they were very numerous, so relationships were harder when communities were bigger. In some geographical areas, we have seen a different composition, small communities, but with sisters coming from several nations, talking about Africa, for example. I remember when we started the Africa project, Mother Marinella in the community explained to us that they opted for small communities with several continents to be represented, so to show how the charism can meet the differences and put together everybody so that nobody prevails on the others. So it was a choice that was made, a conception of community which is to be studied over the time. Because when communities, especially Italy and Europe, became extremely numerous, just consider the Turin community, Basilica di Maria Ausiliatrice, but also Rome communities, also the Auxilium community. Well, nowadays, with new needs emerging, a new rethinking of the composition of the community is necessary, both for the mission but for the livelihood of the community itself also. Needs which have to be met by the community as a whole. So this regards the continents. Talking about the continents, one which is extremely interesting in this moment is the expansion of the Institute in Asia. I would like to show you how since 1940 we passed from 10 FMA to the current 1,533 FMA nowadays. In several decades, we had great increases from 705 in 1990 to 982 in the years 2000. So an increasing community, increasing works, and increasing group of FMA. So we see a great variety of works that in these last few years are particularly careful regarding the emerging needs, so welcoming the attention towards migrants, attention towards refugees, attention towards specific categories of people or disadvantaged people, let's say, not just youth, but also the elderly ones. These are the new frontiers regarding the education world. Asia is to be studied, so sisters who are here, you have a lot to do. You have a lot of material to work on in order to understand which is the situation in Asia, life in Asia, which has different characteristics and features from the social-cultural point of view compared to other continents. Just consider religions which are present there. Just consider the Christian Catholic minority in some contexts where the majority belongs to other religions and beliefs. In some Western countries, we have different situations, of course, but in the Western countries, we have other problems regarding the religious life, the following of secularization, laicity, and other problems. It's a very complex world, and it's not easy to describe it as a whole. So it's extremely interesting to analyze this table, which shows how till 1940 our presence was not even recorded in this area, since we did not have a significant or relevant expansion in that reality. We spoke about FMA. We have to speak also about Europe, of course. This describes the life of our institution in Europe and the curve and the trend in the European continent. So this is the world of FMA. This regards, graph number 10, regards Oceania. This is extremely important also. Take a look at it, not just because of the figures, which are not extremely high, let's say, but for the trend itself, the trend of the numbers. You see a great increase. We have spoken about FMA. In this graph number 11, I compared the number of FMA, the stable FMA, and the novices. Also, this is an extremely interesting data. As I said, in 1970, we have seen the highest number in the Institute. And to better understand this data, we have to consider the number of novices present in 1960. If novices in 1960 were extremely numerous, in the 70s we see a higher number of fixed and stable sisters. We spoke about FMA. Now let's talk about the houses of FMA, let's say the communities. When I talk about houses, I'm not talking about the building itself. So I'm talking about the community created by the FMA sisters. So all around, I will show you which is the situation all around the world, also talking about our houses worldwide. Let's have a tour of the world by this rotating globe. This travel allowed us to enter in our communities, virtually at least, worldwide, and to encounter and to meet young sisters, the youth, collaborators, and the figures showed us that behind the figures there's a great life, a great reality. Figures are to be interpreted not just from the quantitative point of view, but also from the qualitative point of view. As you can see, in green, you can see the nations where communities are present. Okay, graph number 12 shows the open houses over the decades and the houses closed during the past decades. So, in 2000, we see the highest number of open houses, not open in the year 2000, but open as of 2000, and they were 1,564 in 2012, the lowest number, the highest number of closed houses. It would be very interesting to consider the relationship
quanti anni di vita le case hanno
of these
avuto, cioè
figures
quanto sono
with
durate le case
their duration
aperte.
in terms of years.
Seconda fase. Per quale
Then,
motivo
but
le
why
case sono
these
state,
houses
o le comunità sono
were
state soppresse?
finally
Ci sono
closed?
motivi vari
Are
che
there
variano a
many
seconda
reasons
dell'epoca
varying
storica.
according
Faccio
to
un
the
esempio.
historical period?
Negli anni della guerra,
Example,
della seconda
during
guerra
the Second
mondiale,
World
noi
War,
abbiamo avuto
we had
in quegli anni lì una apertura di case
a great
significativa.
opening
Perché, le
in terms of
comunità
number of
dell'FMA,
houses, because the
davanti
community of
alle
FMA,
problematiche,
before
alle necessità che
the
sono
needs
emerse nei tempi
and the
di guerra,
problems emerging
hanno
and stemming from the
risposto a
war,
queste
well, they
urgenze.
responded to this
Ma queste
emergency.
case,
But these
terminata la
houses,
guerra,
once the war
terminato l'urgenza,
ended,
i
once
bisogni
the
a cui hanno
emergency
risposto,
ended,
sono state chiuse.
were closed immediately
Quindi
after.
hanno avuto una
So
vita
they
breve.
had a short life.
La vita,
Means
la vita delle comunità è durata
the life of
tanto
the
quanto
communities
c'era bisogno che
lasted
quella comunità
only for the period
fosse
for which they
aperta
were
per rispondere
necessary in order to meet the temporary
Questo è un
needs of the
esempio
historical
per dire
period.
come
This is an example to show how in the several geographic areas and in the time there have been many reasons why a house was open or closed. So regarding the opening, it would be extremely interesting to analyze the documents of the files and the records, if available, to understand why a house is open indeed. Is it open upon a request of the ecclesial authorities? Is it open because the Institute has carried out a study and it has considered that it's time to reaffirm the charisma in that geographical area? So there is someone resorting to our Institute, requesting our presence there, or are there other reasons? Reasons can be many, of course, so we should analyze all of them. We talk about open houses and closed houses in this graph, as you have seen. Graph number 13 shows the values according to the continents. Number 13 shows houses open in the several continents. In graph number 14 shows the number figures regarding the houses closed in the decades. It's an extremely interesting analysis. You can see the differences, which are extremely significant regarding these figures. Like, for example, in Asia, you can see 458 houses where only 86 were closed. There is not a proportion between those which are open and those which are closed because of the situation responds to varied situations and circumstances. This is the table showing the full figures. The case of Africa. As we've said regarding the FMA, as the FMA data increases from where the moment when the Africa project was promoted, in parallel, also the houses grew in that very same period. You can see this graph. It shows how the Institute has grown with a great boldness and braveness. It's interesting to see the composition of these communities in Africa. In Europe, we have a few nations, many houses in each nation as a trend, a general trend. In Africa, we have many nations and a few houses. Maybe you can find one by each nation, but which is the follow-up of all these? The religious province can be found in Europe according to a configuration which is extremely different than that in Africa, where in Africa I have many nationalities inside a religious province, which I cannot find in other continents. For example, if I consider Italy, for example, Italy has many houses. It had many houses also in the past. But on the other hand, a few nationalities, maybe in the last decades, the situation has changed, where your presence enriched our composition in terms of multinationalities. So this is extremely interesting because it sets many problems from the community point of life. We have to understand which resources we have available, how many resources are made available by the community, a community which is made composed by many nationalities, and how to organize life, daily life, in a community which is made of different cultures, while respecting all of them with the main goal of keeping the charisma of the Institute. What is most important for us is being all together and bringing all together our nationalities, keeping our charisma. This requires reconsidering and reassessing our common way of living and living all together and adjusting it to the modern times and the times we are living in. I read an article recently regarding how Jesus in his life did not consider beforehand on how to structure the life of apostles. He just thought about how announcing the safety of his apostles. And then we have seen the trend of the situation of the houses in Africa. Now this is regarding America. This is a different situation compared to the previous one. You see the highest peak of communities open in the year 2000. Sounds strange because one could say kind of crisis started. How comes these figures are so high? But well, figures are exactly those that we have processed and collected, and this is the reality of the fact. And Asia, considering the number of the houses which were opened or closed, the graph, of course, relatively low figures of closed houses you can see in the very first years. Then an increasing number of houses in the following years. It's extremely interesting to consider how the charisma animates and supports the new communities, and the importance of the contribution of the community to that spirit and the great charisma of the institution itself. So time is passing by, so I have to speed up. In Europe, okay, this is the situation in Europe. We have a long history and we are a bit old, and you can see it from the graph also. Well, the number of open houses diminishes strongly, as you can see in this graph. On the left side, you can see this table where you can see the figures. And here we are passing to Oceania. This is the youngest continent, so different figures also. Graph number 20 again shows the relationship between the number of houses and number of FMA. What does it show exactly? It shows that in 1970, we, according to what we have tried to tell you so far, we have recorded the highest number of houses, 1,459, and the highest number of FMA, over 18,000. So we have
man mano che aumenta il numero delle FMA,
As the number of FMA increases, the graph shows that there is also an increase of the houses which were open. So it's not really an automatic process. Everything depends on the structuring of the communities themselves. We could have experienced a higher concentration of communities in the houses and less open houses than what is shown by the figures themselves. Then houses, and the last point of the contents to be dealt with, the works. Well, this is an extremely interesting point. I really like this issue, I have to say, because it was extremely challenging in the research. Well, according to the works, what to say? As I told you before, when we talk about works, we talk about all the activities that the FMA have implemented in space and in time. But these works, some of these works were structured, for example, primary school, professional school, or a youth center, a retirement house for FMA. But there are some activities which are less structured, like, for example, assistance to mothers, visits to the sick ones, conference for adults, prayers meetings, and so on. So a diversification of the, great diversification of the works, I have to say. So works were noted down as per the lists and the records from the collaborative platform where we have taken this data from. We have resorted to two records and files with two differentiations of the works. By way of example, in the last few years, works have been defined in works of the Institute or not owned by the Institute, because this platform had some specific objectives which were necessary for the general economy. We cannot find this classification of the works in the previous decades, because there was not the real reason for classifying it in this way. But we are trying to work on an alignment of these two platforms, so to work on a more complete work from both perspectives. So let's have a tour now to see where these works were most present and higher. See the documents which becomes colored as works appear over the time. See the situation in Asia and the actual situation in that continent, which is extremely interesting, as we said before. Where you don't see colors, figures are too low, so they are not properly considered in those areas.
Ecco, andiamo a vedere quali sono le opere che hanno caratterizzato.
Let's see which works have characterized the life of the Institute in these last 150 years. There are many works,
sono parecchie migliaia, le
thousands of works.
Allora, la ricerca che cosa ha fatto?
So, what did we do in the research? We try to attribute a category to each work. By doing this work, some categories emerged regarding education as a whole. education and professional training. In vocational training, we have divided whatever regards several types of schools, those who attend our schools or who have attended our schools in the past. But inside the education category, there are different levels. Within the category itself means teaching, coordination, school management, whatever is included in that category, where you can see all the single points, vocational training, regarding all the commitment of FMA for training and educating the youth and preparing them from the work. So vocational training is in this category for of every kind, ranging from the literacy courses for adults to IT courses and other courses for all the others. So vocational training as a response to that call for creating good Christians and giving them the possibilities of being active citizens through their presence in the work reality. Then we have the charismatic work of the congregation itself. Now we have included all the associations that have developed at the youth level inside our communities, religious education regarding catechesis, liturgical animation, the presence in the ecclesiastic organizations at several levels, management or ecclesial responsibilities at very high levels, education houses, education and formation inside the institute, specific formation as to the FMA life. Then missions, which is great from my point of view. If you see all the points included in this category, we can see, and you can see, which were the biggest commitments of our sisters, which started new works in new territories, involving new situations, new peoples, of course, and it's a very varied category, and one could be also surprised by the variety of this category. And our response could be that once our sisters came into a reality and they saw some specific situation, they understood the time was come to meet those challenges and to respond to that specific needs. Then the associations, I'm talking about more formal associations, I'm talking about COSPES, TGS, HGS, CNOS, and CHOFS associations in Italy, regarding these formal associations, which are and which give a great visibility to the institute in the at the civil level. They are our presence on the civil scenario. Then assistance works. This is a category that now should be revisited in a way. We included in this category social works, which regard assistance as a whole. Then we have hospitality regarding welcoming college, welcoming houses, houses for young people finding their work in Italy, like for example in the industries, in other places. So how to help these people? By creating these works. Retirement houses for FMA, which are not really present in the early life of the Institute, but which are developing and increasing in some areas where the age of the sisters is increasing, and therefore they need some specific cures. and attentions, let's say. Then the last category, the services, regarding the services that our sisters have carried out, especially in the Salesian houses, the general house. We had strong presence, especially in Italy, in this field. When we made this research, we found out that close to Piazza Maria Ausiliatrice in Torino, there were some 5 FMA communities at the services of the need, the people most in need. SDB. Then, in the last column, other, you can see a grouping of other works which are difficult to be classified as of now. Of course, we have to reconsider these last figures, this last column. So this is the general framework of the works of FMA in the decades, over the decades. So please notice that we have calculated the number of houses closed, opened, and all the other related figures. But we have to consider that in some nations, the works that the communities did continue also when the community is not physically present there, in that continent, in that city. And they keep on working through the works of the Salesian cooperators, collaborators, the associations to which we have entrusted our mission and our work. Also here we have to consider a new concept of work, but we have to reconsider how that work belongs to the Institute and how to keep alive that the vitality of our mission and our charisma, and to keep our Salesian spirit in all these works, which educational style, which formation to give out to educators, by which tools, how the presence of FMA can be strengthened in these works. So there's much to study on, as you can see in this graph. I cannot take too much time about this graph, but on the vertical axis you can see on the left the different categories or macro categories of works as we define them, divided by continents again. Please notice that there are some works, for example, regarding education, let's say, the category which I'm showing to you through the mouse, which is the highest, the most present in the several continents, but followed the second place, second position, the category of works that we have called the so-called hospitality in general. There is a cultural passage, a cultural meaning behind this. We are increasingly careful regarding works which do not just have a structure as a school can be, but also regarding other perspectives with the different features and different news and something new regarding the past, whatever we defined as a hospitality, which is a varied category, and we really care for. Then I chose to graphically represent 3 works which are the most numerous and most frequent ones inside the Institute regarding formation, oratory groups, and religious formation. The different colors show the figures according to the different years where that kind of work was present and how much it was present. So please notice how whatever concerns education and formal education keeps on increasing since the origins to nowadays, with an exception for a few years. But whatever regards the oratory group, second group, well, you can see in these figures a kind of decrease regarding the presence of the oratories in the world. Another important question to ask ourselves, are we present in the formal field and increasing our presence. So in some areas of the world, okay, this presence is increasing, okay, in some areas of the world. But how comes whatever regards the oratorium is recording a different trend? What is upstream? What do we mean by oratorium? What do we mean by the word oratory? This is another important point for our research, clarifying the terminology and understanding this work and including in the different in these categories whatever are the features of these words. Then religious education, what we can see here is a decrease in the religious education and formation. So why this decrease? Are we decreasing our presence from the point of view of houses, works, and so on? We should reconsider this. This is the general framework and some data regarding the works. Then I would also like to make some considerations regarding these data from the quality point of view. What we have seen, even if shortly, is a short contribution for celebrating this 150th year of life of the Institute. But this shows the importance of the Institute, for the works through the work for the Church, through the works of the sisters all over the world and all across the generations. Figures are just part of a bigger research. There are many figures to be considered and useful for studying and deepening several issues. Research, as you can understand, can be partial, of course, but it's open to the contributions which come from the outside and which can complete its outcomes. Methodologies adopted were created starting from zero. We have not found anything similar before which we could have been working on. So we had to approach a brand new research by constructing and creating a methodology. We tried to adopt a kind of criteria enabling us to achieve our goal, that is to make a photo of the Institute. So this is my opinion regarding these data. The data have shown how some historical moments were extremely critical for our Institute, and on one hand they diminished the presence of the FMA, houses and works, but on the other hand they have stimulated the creativity of the communities facing the emerging needs. New works were born, like orphan houses, and in recent times, in collaboration with territory institutions, structures for welcoming migrants, refugees and all. At the same time, the sensitiveness belonging to the charisma of the FMA made them careful towards new kinds of poverty, not just involving the youth and children, but also adults, which are pretty disadvantaged. So new solidarity networks have been created on the territory. These networks which were not even conceived in the past. So, besides responding to the emergencies, maybe it's necessary to consider places and train people able to anticipate the future. Time has come to do this. Time has come to understand the new challenges ahead. A second question, do we agree that the future of our society is not something we can wait for, but it's a process to be designed? Are we convinced about that? Third point. Third question. Which is the role of FMA in shaping the future? If preventiveness does not just imply avoiding that something negative will happen, but also implies promoting, designing, and creating the welfare and well-being of people, especially those detected by the FMA. Fourth question. Shaping the future is a task of the young FMA only, or each of us has his own responsibility in doing so? Fifth question, which new lifestyle, community lifestyle, would be much required to shape the future? Then, a second nucleus inside this question. Over the history, the response to the emergencies has forced the communities of FMA to structure themselves on the basis of the needs they have to meet, thanks to the inner strength of its charisma, which pushed the institution to be careful and to be close to the people. Then another question arises. Is it necessary now to understand how to be better educated and trained as a community, while also making out of the institution the real meaning, the real reason for being present all over the world? Third nucleus, the research data shows a decrease in the number of FMA in the institutes. So the number of sisters were missing because they pass away overcomes the number of the young who ask and want to enter. So there is another question regarding the future of admission and charisma. Another question, can we locally think not only at the central level on how to work in a network while keeping the specificity of the FMA? Considering that the figures are decreasing, we do not also forget about the education and the formation of all. The post-COVID and COVID period made the education need emerge and showed how many crises we can experience in the educational field. Well, social cultures where we live in strongly call for an action for all the educators, which is the contribution that FMA can give to create a culture which focuses mainly on education. Which are the competencies to be acquired in this field? Which are the resources to be made available for reaching this purpose and achieve this goal? Contemporaneity is implementing new cultural processes, profound transformations of the working world, the new needs in the school reality, the increasing new models of the increasing new family models, and the speed of all these transformations go hand in hand with bad feelings and anxiety and despair, which try to impose themselves, trying to kill the hope of a renewed life and new timings that should come. The time to consider new questions before giving prepared, already preconfectioned answers is the future of the Institute. Forces us to consider the educational dimension and the emergence and the importance of understanding and knowledge the cultures of the youth in order to properly intervene and act promptly in the education. At the second level, from my point of view, it's necessary to better know these youth cultures, to understand their needs and their values, to decodify the hidden meanings of their cultures and their realities. This is what Salesian education means today. Some methodologies.
Le opere nella ricerca sono state censite.
The first question of the works are there are census with a terminology that is go back to the sources. The terminology used may describe better the terms in order to better interpret them. So we need to re-understand the meaning of some words. For example, internals, family houses, colleges, what are actually today. The second question, the deepening of the meaning that used for the works might lead them to classify our work in a different way compared to what is done till now. Assistance, maybe the new term could be hospitality. And so this shows that this category, hospitality, better depicts that work compared to assistance. And the third question is concern the alignment of the data with the collaboration platform. So, with the contribution of the sisters, the classification of the works can be done in collaboration. So, we can see that sisters work together in different cultural contexts. And the last point concerns the possibility of digitalized data of single years of each decade. I only quoted the years of the decade, but it would be great to digitalize year after year. This would enable us to monitor better the life of the Institute, so that we can build up a legacy that we can transfer to future generations that will focus on the life of the community. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bene, ringraziamo.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this broad explanation and presentation. We got the figures, but we now understand better what are these figures that might be helpful for the future. Now we have 30 minutes for a small debate to hear the resonances, from the comments of this morning. We received many questions, both of them, as you can see, pose many questions. For example, the governance, for example. And now all these questions that we had, can we be written? And now we would like to open the questions. I have open questions. I would like to have a couple of responses. So the first question that I receive is, we are a missionary institute, a missionary that has so many people that are working in missionaries. Missionary institute means a work in mission. How can put together the necessity of putting to the documented the daily life, the chronicle life, together with the work of accompanying the young people? How could we document what we are doing. Let's see what Paola reply. And then a second question, and more is a question, is a point. Could transfer the slides to the videos bureau? I think there won't be any difficult to transfer such slides. Well, if I could have the magic stick, I would have the recipes, but I do not have any magic stick. So I do not have any effective replies. But I think we should try to find the right balance between, how can I say, the active involvement, active life, as well as the possibility to document our path, the path that we are doing. So we should try maybe find some criteria. What we should find. It's not just a chronicle. I did that, and then I did that, and then I did that. For example, I have been studying some chronicles of a congregation, and the Superior Mother left by car, then she came back. Of course, all these news are not necessary. We don't need them. It is important to record and find the time, maybe get somebody else in charge, that are more prone to it, but that should be committed to it. Sign and record the important facts. The facts that mark the life of a community. And this is important, and it cannot be postponed to tomorrow. Tomorrow I will do it, tomorrow I will do it, and then I will write it down tomorrow what it happened 1 week ago. That's a kind of practice, exercise, and it falls within formation, within training. Means that somebody should get this commitment. It is like a service that might seem to be a loss of time, but instead how enables the community to reread what it has done, and at the same time to leave a trace of what was done. If you think that each of us think about her life, how many things we did, how many commitments, how many actions, and you realize that you did so many things once you stop and think over and to take stock of what you have been done. We are more involved from, for example, emergencies, because sometimes we don't have resources, we don't have the personnel, and then we are fully committed in activities, full activities. Then, if a Christian person, for a Christian person, it's important not only the active participation, but also the essence, what really feeds your energy, the spiritual moment, the religious moment, the praying moment. And then, well, this is really nourishes your strength to implement active participation. So we should try to find the right balance, the small room, the small space, in a trustworthy way, daily, a space to document and register. And this is an effort that you should do in the condition that we need it not only because we want to show how great I was, how grand I was, how much I achieved, how much my community is able to do and achieved, but it's because you are able in this way to leave a trace, to leave an evidence. So we can show that God operates through the sisters. And I think this is the real core, the real point. I really really think we should act and work on it. Maybe some of you already did it, to teach to those who have to write down, who have to write the chronicle, the actualities. So to have a kind of skipping and skimming of the issues to write it down. Very strong is a violation of human rights. Very often as an institute we act and we raise our voice at United Nations. Why nobody refers to it? That actually plays a huge impact and favor young people. That's small questions. Yes, by analyzing the data, that this is element emerges in the category other, where we record the presence of our sisters in the international organizations. Yes, you have to click on the single items, and then we have many items, and so analytically we record all data. So also these data are present. For example, I didn't mention also the presence of former pupils, former sisters that were working at some social communities. And for is everything recorded according to what the list was written. So, of course, if in those lists there was no not recording the action, then we couldn't record them. That's what I was saying before. It's very important to record each action because we build up our history in this way. If we do not have data, we cannot analyze them. We cannot say what we were and what we are. Any questions here from the audience? I thank you, the two speakers, of the wonderful statements that are very well documented. In the interval, the pause, the break, I already asked, but now I address my question to Suor Maria Teresa. How can we document the resonance, the reverberation of our works and the impact on the young people, on the community, in the territory? Well, we have actual tools that enable us to record our effects, our resonances, because from a sociological point of view, we can collect the data. For example, we have the Google tools that can help us to enable us and to reach everybody. I'm working for a congregation that decided to study what others, for example, think about us. They are present in 5 different continents. There are not so many sisters, maybe 3,000, but they're spread in different continents with many communities. We organize a Google form in different languages, also idiolects, and therefore we are studying also this aspect. Yes, indeed, we can do it. I add that to what I was referring at the end of my remarks, the attempt to understand how the educational experience and lived experience, not much within the community, but the lived experience that was lived on behalf of the girls that were attending oratories that had received Salesian education and then were able to work and enter the working world, how this formation impacts at a personal level, but also of the formation of her life, family life, working life. So how really impact such of the Salesian formation, depending on if the formation was long or short, really impact me and my experiences and on what I can, as an adult, implement in my life, and also the witnessing that I will be able to offer following the formation that I receive, because it's an impact, these are an effect that can also impact the others. Good morning to everybody. I belong to the Association of the Past Pupils. So I'm very interested in the FMA history. So once again, I thank you. I'm heard fully heartedly. This morning we could hear that history means also living this life and documenting it. It's maybe the most difficult aspect because it's difficult to be implemented. Also because the aspect of the identity is not so clear very often. Therefore, we should work on it and give us visibility. So I thank you, and I would like also highlight also how today's society is so complicated, so liquid, so diversified, since it has so many cultures, should be visible and should also represent the visible part that gives a meaning to our being and belonging to FMA, where, for example, in some realities where FMA are no longer there, and then the lady maybe feels a bit unbalanced. So this is really our work, demanding work that requires time, patience, and so each of us in every part of the world should be taken into consideration, has a specific identity, also enthusiasm. Yes, because without it we cannot achieve much. Thank you. Yes, it's more competent question. But then there is another online question. Is it possible to trace the modus operandi of FMA with the Salesian group and their works? What kind of collaboration? Can we comment the collaborations with the laity? Maybe that's a qualitative data, and therefore hypothesized, assume quantitative elements that, yes, we did record. We did record the presence of the former pupils in the FMI pupils in the community, the presence in that country, in that village, in that time at that community. What they have done there, then, as you can see, we will need other records to understand it, so that we can see if what has been done can emerge, because the chronicle criteria, as Piera was telling us, maybe were not the same throughout time. So not everybody has been standardized in their recording. But I think this aspect should also be studied on behalf of the former pupils of FMA. Means from your documentation, what was your work with us? So we with you and you with us. Two different aspects should be assessed and studied. Then we still have 10 minutes. We can work till 12:10. We still have 15 minutes to have questions and replies. I'm Suor Piera. For those who are listening to us, more than a question is a consideration. We could see maybe if there is a nice path. Both the conclusions were very stimulating. The ones coming from Suor Teresa, they were saying we have to prepare us for the future, just because, and we have to better understand youth cultures. Concerning the formation of this category, we have really an item dedicated to it, or maybe we can add other data. What kind of formation to the consecrated life was given at the same time at the professional forming training, which areas of studies, with disciplinary areas, according to different times and eras, because we highlighted the dimension of formation for effective response of educational needs. Knowing and forming, it's important, because today the commitment to form a new generation FMA formation, how it looks like, is up to aims to give some titles, but what is behind those titles? When I'm thinking about, for example, imagining that the level of education, for example, I take for granted that is higher. For example, in the Institute, we record more people with a degree, university degree, but this improvement of the level of formation, maybe there is not the kind of really working formation. I'm thinking about the call and the comparison with the anthropologies. Maybe it's not a question. It's more another aspect that maybe it's very urgent for the future, because we are preparing people, novices, new fresh men and women to prepare at life. So I have been dedicated from vocational training houses. I was always here at Auxilium, and therefore it's very meaningful for us. So we really gave life to form new novices and sisters. In what terms we should keep on going and maybe bend? Thank you very much. This question is extremely interesting, also from the work of the research, because there are some important elements. I think at true time, the Institute have a preoccupation and was the one to qualify the co-sisters, because throughout some decades, the qualification get to gain a basic degree, so that standardize all the preparation of the FMA. If I think sisters that have a compulsory education title and then got a diploma. Today we have young sisters that already get with a degree in their hands in different areas. Now the question to be posed is how to Salesian qualify cultural formation that these co-sisters have. Then developing a project in which we can really give them the tools that actually the life of the Institute requires. So living in depth our mission in the young world. And especially for some studying titles that maybe do not foresee any pedagogical preparation, we should think how to complete their preparation with these pedagogical tools. I think this was a very good question. I'm Suor Laretta. I'm here. Can you see me? I'm here. As concerned to the data, I would like to highlight the fact that very often in the works, in the project of the works, plannings are made, network planned, not only for the ad interim opera, but also for long works. And there is a network collaboration that is really meaningful. So this collaboration element with the networks is extremely strong in our institute, especially for the vocational training of our institute. On one project with Europe, we had 100 organizations which has been collaborating together. This is a meaningful, important aspect to describe the work of the Institute. So we're not only describing the work only from within, but also through the collaboration that they have through their different networks with our institutes, trends, and so on. So this is a very motivating aspect from a vocational point of view. Thank you very much. We should also record this so that it can be shown when we carried out researches, because in a certain way we don't have this category. I'm posing my question now. Maria Teresa. We are studying, as you can see, all the statistic data. The fundamental question is the results, the outcomes of these huge activities. Could we quantify them, calculate them? Not only people who get the end at their school, what kind of information we were able to give in 5-year oratory. This is, I think, difficult to record. I remind you that 56 years ago a survey was carried out and then was in a certain way censored because there were things that maybe were displeased somebody, especially for those who was reading those researches, surveys. Could we consider, hypothesize the survey on the outcome of FMA education in determined historical period, or we are always leave the whole things in the hands of God? We did what we did, and then in the future we will see if we can did the right things or not. For the future, can we record the outcomes if we sown well, planted well of our Salesian works? First of all, the first thing you should do, we should study the work of the past pupils and students. We should get them nearer, working with them. And third point, I really do not know how can we really record what they have achieved in their formation, and what they achieved depended on us, on other things. This is difficult to record. But maybe we could think about a research project, which how can we trace back such aspects and say maybe your result depended on us. There are some sisters who carried out her own survey, and what they learn throughout these Salesian the years. So yes, we have a research that was carried out among our sisters. I would like to ask to Maria Teresa, by keeping into account the plurality of languages that we have in our institute, yes, many of the works that you gave us, terminology really does not correst to what we are really doing. Therefore, I see that in reality, some educational actions that are not really recorded, even if they are there. Yes, then we may have some subcategories to collect those data. Yes, I can tell you there are there, but there are subcategories within the file. So what is written in the list, I repeated it, because of course I did not find anything in the source. I cannot record. So first of all, the first important thing is a translation of the terms. Secondly, what kind of meaning we confer to that term, the casa famiglia, the family house, what it actually is. The very work that I label in this way in Italy, how is called abroad in a different place without a terminology, but maybe corresponds to casa famiglia. Therefore, we should find and collect all this richness, this rich terminology. Otherwise, we can discover losing it, and it's extremely precious instead. I was thinking, listening to you, that in this 150-year-old, one of the major shifts that occur in the Institute is the change of the theology. In these last 150 years, theology has changed, the way of thinking religious life, the way of thinking the charisma, and thinking about the state of life of the Christians. And these are topics that are in theory, in continuum, and thanks to all different experiences that we have in the last 50 years. We do think that, we do believe from the Holy Spirit that, and I was thinking that maybe many things are recorded in our documents, but, and this is the very, this kind of researchers show us all this way of thinking landed on the real life way of collaborating, being able of living the legacy of the charism also to people that are not consecrated, inculturation, we mentioned it before. Maybe it wouldn't be interesting to create a kind of a meeting of the results and the consideration of the charisma and so on. So a point of contact. Yes, I think that our work, it's a partial work, limited work, because it needs the help from other sources that could justify it, could get this work in deeper. It's in a certain way limited work, biased work, because it's not enough. Well, without the others, we are limited. One of the males congregation, the male Salesian congregation, we heard the figures, the female figures, but in parallel we have the male figures. Maybe figures are changing. Typology of works are changing. For us, it's easy. There are 10, 15 types. For us, you have instead 100 and so on. But the question is, why did we have this growth, this shrinking? These are pedagogical, political questions, emergency questions. We all live the same charisma. Therefore, here we have the mutual help, the parallel work that we have to carry on. history, we had this result, we have these happenings, and in the future might occur something else. So in order to round up the female work of the females, FMA females, we could also have the same survey in the male, Salesian male institutions, because actually the reasons that leads to a change and enlargement and so on is suggested by the situation, lies not on the difference between female and male. Maybe we should have a broader research to see this reality with a broader picture. Yes, the common points might emerge, and also the differences might emerge. There are some differences between the females and males, the same way of how to conceive the life of our communities, some specificities. But of course, from each other we can enrich ourselves. Well, we still have some minutes, some minutes left. I would like to thank you all for all your consideration. Concerning a question from Paola, I heard very much the call to the charisma at the local level in different territories. Now, it implies our responsibilities. Sometimes we do not leave traces of our path, choices, and we do not have traces of it. Also for future generations, I'm thinking future generations. I feel a responsibility from a historical perspective, so the conscience of living, written by written, I'm thinking about the province research and so on, the difficulties and encounter differences, as you were saying. I do think that beyond the chronicles of the community is a chronicle of the province, of the provincial meetings, where we can really touch with our hands the problems. This is a call for us. Share this historical responsibility by thinking future generations. Yes, there is a responsibility of the lived legacy and enrichment that should not be lost. So the responsibility, accountability, but also value and sharing it, we know. And also there is something else that I'm teaching history of pedagogy, and one of my books that was not written by me, but written by a colleague was referring to the women education back to the 50s, and she had
negli anni 50 della serie si educa a pregare, punto e basta.
A kind of joke that she had for the young novice, that she wrote that they were only taught of praying, and this is really a bias. The responsibility of keeping and preserving the past experience and transferring it in a correct way, that to those that are not belonging to your worlds, is also this. Means how was really the commitment in education and the formation of the young women was not only to teach them praying, and it's an action that has to get beyond praying, that because it will impact not only the formation of each woman, but also on what she will do in her life, in her working life, in the familiar experience that may she have, whatever she will be in the life. So there will be impacts. Therefore, this documentation is extremely important to show the actions that could promote women education, that it cannot only link to what Italy has, for example, at the beginning of this 20th century, like in Italy, so that is very limited by translating in from my dialect, women that satisfies her husband and that stay homes, and if she leaves home, she should go to church. This concept is, of course, outdated. Therefore, we should show our history, how good we are, and also the action who took place in the Muslim ladies, in the women that were very simple, were very common. Thank you. We still have 2-3 minutes.
Io mi chiamo Sor Bruno, sono di Padova.
So Bruno, I'm from Padova. I'm replying to the question that was posed by Don Francesco, if it was possible to measure better the outcomes of our formation, of our education. I have my own experience, and I would like to storytell you to encourage you. I have always lived in the school environment, and my experience refers to the school, my space, school. And I wanted to see what actually was left, what we have been doing, the so-called good morning. For our guys is one of the pillars of our Salesian education. What does remain from our buongiorno once high school is over? And there were some youth, some young people who have their own high school degree, around 20, also 25 youth. I'm thinking about 200 young people who really attended our school. They were ladies and who absorbed and learned our pedagogy. And they were also coordinators, and therefore they were giving their good morning to the young people or a couple of times during the week. So the result that we had was that giving the floor, and not only what we decided to say, but the fact that we let talk those who received, it's already an answer. And this is, I was saying to the senior nuns, they really have the right to have a say on the future. What we find out was pretty surprising. 25 young people replying this way. Some felt and remember that moment in a pretty heavy way that was kind of labeled as ideological. They felt that some things were pushed in a certain way. In the end, there was two fundamental questions. If they remember in one particular good morning who really marked their life. And I really I have assisted that they said who, when, and where they got from that very good morning, they learned something who turned out to be meaningful for their life. And the other question was if, it was also for the teachers, if that very good morning, the very educational moment, thinking of transferring it to other places in the public school, for example, they had implemented. Yes, they reply, yes, they have implemented. Yes, for that relation that they were able to implement. So beyond, by saying of my small effort, for me, there is a sense of giving the word, give the floor to those who can express their opinion, both if they are young people or parents, so that they can describe us how we really teach and transfer things through our words. So this is a very important aspect, how to be seen from the others, the ones who enjoy our formation. So in this way, I think we could have a well-round up snapshot of what we are. Now we got to an end to our morning, and we have a view, overall view on your history has been written and how has been transformed through the decades, and how could we think about it, how will be in the future. Then we saw statistics, figures, but both the well-written history and figures should be interpreted, because from these figures, questions arise, from the questions, from the replies, from the answers to our questions, we could keep on and going on. Some days ago, I participated in another conference concerning the economics, and the major issue that I heard: are we facing epochal change, new moment, risorgimento? We have to shift the paradigm, change the world. We are assisting a new rinascimento, renaissance. Also, as you can see, also in the economic field, we are living in a kind of awakening. And I remind you, nuns, they always also have to manage the budget, the economy. So, of course, then we have to build the present and build the future. That is actually what we'll focus on this afternoon and the next few days. Is it all right? Thank you very much. We thank all those who are connected remotely, and so enjoy your. We are going to enjoy our lunch, and then in the afternoon at 15 p.m. we will meet once again for our second session of our day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and for us, enjoy your lunch. Bye.